8:08 now.
When we were at university, I had a crush on you.
We've never actually met.
Emma Morley.
I'll walk you home.
Sorry, I'm not good at this.
Maybe we could just be friends.
Okay.
On the day they met, Dexter and Emma never imagined
We will see each other again.
I know we will.
how their lives would intersect over the next 20 years.
I'm a disaster.
I'm sure it's not a complete disaster. Come on, everyone's lost at 25.
You're not. Trainee TV producer, nice new flat.
You need a holiday.
Yes, well, the trailer for this one is for One Day, and Lena Lamont is in for the film review to tell us all about it. Morning, Lena.
Good morning, Wammo.
Morning. What's this one all about?
The trailers, it's a bit of a shame in a way, because people who haven't read the book of One Day, like most of the world probably,
No.
barring you and I,
Yeah.
have read One Day, loved
Really?
it as a book, and will
Okay.
be eagerly anticipating this as a film. But I feel, listening to that trailer, there'll be a whole lot of people who go, oh, this just sounds really sappy, and it's probably a bit lame and a bit cliched.
Doesn't help with the voiceover.
No, that voiceover guy.
He's so
Anyway.
happy.
One Day isn't as sappy and awful as that trailer just made it sound, I should say, straight off the bat.
Okay.
So, right, as we've said, best-selling novel by David Nichols. Now, thankfully, David Nichols wrote the screenplay for the movie, and I always think that's a relatively good sign if you loved a book, because
Yeah.
it means that it should be as faithful as possible, right, barring intervention from major studios. So, we've got Emma and Dexter, or Em and Dext, and they're in England, and Anne Hathaway, who is an American actress but does very good British accents as a rule, and a raft
she looks
of films.
British.
And she can look British, I
Yeah.
suppose, sure. Anne Hathaway plays a lass from Northern England, so she actually puts on a slightly North of England accent in this. She's been slammed a bit for it in England, where probably their ears are more highly tuned than ours are here.
Definitely, yeah.
I thought she did a pretty good job, to be honest with you. Jim Sturgis, who was in the Casino movie 21. I don't know if you saw that a few years ago. That was kind of exciting. That was based on a book too, which was a good book. And he's also in the Beatles music movie Across the Universe. I'm really not sure how that film... Yeah, it was kind of like... I think it was a little bit like a Moulin Rouge,
Oh, yeah.
except that Moulin Rouge used tunes from all different people, so that's not a very good comparison at all. But it was basically Beatles songs wound into a movie. Anyway,
Never saw it.
Jim was in that, and he's an English actor. And in this film, he speaks kind of posh. So automatically, you've got girl from north of England, which I think we're supposed to sort of think is wrong side of tracks.
Right.
I say that very carefully because it is not my personally held belief, but you know what I mean? She's meant to be maybe a little more working class, and he's frightfully posh and has parents in a lovely house out in, I can't remember, perhaps Surrey. And they meet on graduation day, 15th of July, I think it is, 1988, and sort of form some sort of connection, and thereafter we see them either together or apart on the 15th of July every year subsequently for about 20 years. So their friendship spans 20 years, and we
Right.
get to track the trajectory of their relationships and their friendships and their fallings out and various states of employment and drug addiction and kind of difficulties and all that sort of thing, which is actually a very nice concept.
So, and how do they age? You see them aging?
They age gradually. But
Right.
you know, actually, that's quite convincing, because when I think back to how I think I looked 20 years ago, I don't think I've changed that much.
Right.
So, you know, there's a little bit of a change. Obviously, in the 80s, Anne Hathaway's wearing sort of Doc Marten boots and a frilly dress and a funny little jacket, and her hair is a bit more 80s, and her glasses are round, sort
Yeah.
of Harry Potter-esque glasses. And then by the time she reaches... quick do the math, 2008.
Yes.
Obviously, she's a 2008 young swan.
One Day.
So, yeah.
It's from the director of An Education. Now, I love that film. That
Yeah.
was a brilliant film. So
Yeah.
you would hope for good things with this one.
Well, that's exactly right as well. And I scored this pretty highly One Day, and I think it was a beautifully made film. I think that, I don't know how to say her name, she's Danish, Lona Schöfig, who, you're quite right, did An Education, and that shot Carrie Mulligan into the big time. I think she has a really nice touch with this film. It felt to me that it had a similar sort of slightly muted photography and lighting, and kind of that gave it a certain realism.
And now, even though you haven't read the book, would you imagine that maybe people who have read the book might be slightly disappointed in the movie, just because the book obviously spans that 20 years, and you've got to compress that 20 years now into this movie.
Yeah, into about 2 hours. Yeah. Do you know, I couldn't say for sure.
But you'd imagine maybe there might be...
You probably would. I think there are very few instances where your love of a book can be transferred completely to love of a film. I mean, inevitably it's not going to do it justice, and you're quite right. I think that time span is one of the bigger issues there. Hopefully people will find that whoever they had in their mind as an Emma and a Dexter while they were reading the book is well played out by Jim and Anne, as I like to call them. And I felt that Jim and Anne had a nice, easy chemistry with one another, and that it's probably down to her as much as anything. I do think she's quite a good actress. You really believed this sort of best friendship that they have over the course of 20 years. So hopefully people won't be disappointed.
Obviously quite a different story, but it sounds a little bit to me like Before Sunrise, Before Sunset.
Yeah, right.
As well.
I have to say it's very different from that, simply because Before Sunrise and then Before Sunset, which was about 10 years later, that was born very much out of they met, they fell in love immediately,
One
they
night.
were together for 24 hours or whatever it was, and then for 10 years when they weren't in touch with one another, didn't see one another at all, but sort of probably kept on that romantic illusion of this was the love of my life and I've lost her. This is different. This is almost, well, it probably is more real and more realistic, because friendships can go for 20 years, during which time one might fancy the other more, and then the other might go out with somebody else, and then the other gets married to someone else, and then that, those sorts of ebbs and flows are more likely to happen. Yeah.
Okay, One Day was the name of that one. Now onto something completely different.
My heart is beating like a bongo drum. I wish we could just cancel the whole thing and all go back to bed. 13 and a half is too young to leave home.
What's your name, boy?
John Milton.
John Milton, sir!
What do we have here? Looks like a rumpy silkworm with an eating disorder. Spud! Little Spuddy!
I don't remember inviting you here, Spuddy.
Spud is the name of this film, a South African flick.
This is something quite different. Well, in a way, it's okay. This is something quite different because, thankfully, it's not a Hollywood coming-of-age movie about a boy going off to boarding school. It's South African, and it's based on a best-selling South African novel that has apparently had 2 or 3 sequels. So, in South Africa, at very least, this is huge, Spud, right? So the reason I particularly wanted to mention it today is there will be a large portion of our New Zealand population who go, wow, I read that book and I'd really like to see this film, and I think they should. What I'd be interested in is how the New Zealand audiences take to it. But bottom line is, it is a typical coming-of-age story. We've got a young chap called John Milton, who is probably the best thing in this whole film. He's a fantastic little actor. His nickname is Spud because he goes to boarding school, and he is not the coolest guy, and he is not the most bullied guy. He's come somewhere in the middle. But they nickname him Spud, and so sometimes he's a winner and sometimes he's a loser in things. He's a sweet kid in this. He's very, very good. And so it's kind of a basic kind of schoolboy japes, all the kind of things that boys get up to at boarding school. So there's that element of it. But then there's also this really nice sort of unusual sort of humour that goes along with the fact that his parents are always these sort of caricatures of a strange sort of racist father, because also I think this is set in round about 1990, so a very pertinent time in South African history. So he's got this racist father, and they've got a black maid who, when apartheid is busted up, sort of turns the tables on the family. And at the same time, John or Spud is away at school, developing friendships, falling in love with girls, and all the sort of the cliches that go along with being a teenage boy and fancying beautiful girls. So they kind of touch on what's going on in the country, and they kind of really don't touch on it at all. And then the other strange thing about it is that you've got John Cleese returning from however many years in acting wilderness, I do not know, playing the governor, the English teacher who's very forthright and drinks a lot and uses quite dodgy language for a teacher.
So is he comedy relief?
Kind of, yeah. Except that probably the schoolboy japes are supposed to be comedy relief as well. So it's a strange little film because I'm not sure where to pitch it. If it weren't for some of the rather juicier language that comes out of the film, you'd go, this is school holiday fare, send your 8-year-old, send your 10-year-old. I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe it's a little bit mature in that regard. So I'm really, therefore, not sure how much an older child or indeed an adult would enjoy it.
Okay.
But it's kind of, I don't know, yeah, it's a difficult one to recommend because it was very hard to sort of put into a box and say, this is who it's appropriate for. But it's charmingly done. And, yeah, it would be mainly, it's the performances which are great. And as I say, if you've read Spud or you know about Spud, you're totally going to want to see this film.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Spud and One Day were the two films we looked at with Lena Lamont. Check out the film reviews in the Sunday Star Times and also lenalamont.wordpress.com. See you next week.
See you.
Come the wrong way.
Milton, that forward defensive was as porous as a whore's drawers.